Central Anatolia is defined by an arid, sun-scorched surface, but plunge beneath the rock and you enter a completely different environment, an intricate, multi-layered geometric labyrinth. This blueprint maps Derinkuyu, an 85-meter-deep subterranean metropolis. The accessible cross-section reveals 8 distinct floors, featuring enough dense urban infrastructure to sustain 20,000 individuals completely disconnected from the world above. Determining exactly when this network was excavated presents a severe archaeological problem. Radiocarbon dating requires organic material. Because Derinkuyu is carved entirely from stone, it lacks a definitive chronological stratigraphy. The rock itself cannot tell us when it was cut. Without a carbon timeline, researchers rely on competing explanatory models. The mainstream baseline posits that the city served as a terrestrial refuge, constructed and expanded by Byzantine Christians evading regional invading armies. A second model evaluates the site through a climatological lens. This hypothesis suggests the excavation was designed as a survival ark, engineered to insulate a population from a sudden, global deep freeze. A third paradigm, often termed the cryptoterrestrial or extraterrestrial hypothesis, argues that the city's specific defensive vectors do not align with terrestrial warfare. Instead, they point exclusively to highly advanced airborne threats. By conducting a strict architectural forensic analysis of the physical rock, we can reverse engineer the exact type of threat Derinkuyu was built to deflect. A total lack of chronological data forces us to rely entirely on structural engineering and defensive anomalies. The walls cannot give us a date, but their design can help us deduce the origin of the civilization that built them. The geological foundation of this entire excavation relies on Cappadocia's unique bedrock, a material known as volcanic tuff. Tuff is highly porous and soft enough to carve with primitive hand tools, but it possesses a highly specific chemical property. Upon exposure to air, the newly cut surface rapidly lithifies, hardening into an impenetrable crystalline shell. Excavating 85 meters deep into the earth introduces immense vertical pressure. To prevent a massive cave-in, the builders utilized a precise structural mechanic. They left these unexcavated, top-heavy support columns intact to distribute the load of the ceiling. Mainstream archaeology relies on these physical parameters to build a timeline. Conventional models attribute the initial, shallow excavations to the Phrygians or Hittites during antiquity, utilizing the soft tuff for basic storage. This model states that centuries later, between the 7th and 11th centuries, Byzantine Christians vastly expanded the network downward, creating a deep sanctuary to hide from invading Arab raids. The physical proof used to validate this Byzantine occupation is found in the upper levels. We see specific religious architecture, cruciform chapels, and distinct iconographic frescoes painted directly onto the stone. The mainstream model successfully explains who occupied the city last. The frescoes confirm a Byzantine presence. It fails, however, to definitively prove when the deepest, most complex engineering of the lowest levels was originally executed. When we analyze the sheer volume of underground storage and livestock capacity, a different profile emerges. The scale implies a need for long-term, multi-generational isolation, rather than a brief military hiding spot used during seasonal raids. This capacity points researchers toward the younger Dryas climate model. This theory argues that a comet impact, roughly 14,500 years ago, plunged the Earth into a sudden mini-ice age. A sudden, cataclysmic drop in global temperatures would render surface agriculture impossible. Surface populations would be forced to seek thermal shelter deep underground to survive the freezing environment. This animated diagram illustrates Derinkuyu's thermal dynamics. The surrounding Earth acts as a massive geothermal battery, maintaining a constant internal temperature of a stable 13 to 15 degrees Celsius, regardless of the freezing conditions above ground. Within this geothermal profile, we see specific zones designated for livestock and grain processing. The livestock generate ambient body heat, which is vented separately from the living quarters. This configuration could theoretically sustain a closed-loop ecosystem without any access to surface agriculture. A global climate disaster provides a flawless motive for creating a self-sustaining underground ecosystem. However, this climatological model entirely fails to account for the city's extreme, heavy-duty military fortifications. In 1982, researcher Eric von Daniken conducted a forensic analysis of the city. He highlighted a series of structural anomalies that defy both terrestrial history and climate models. The primary defensive vector of Derinkuyu relies on massive, circular millstone doors, some weighing up to 500 kilograms, slotted directly into the narrow corridors. The mechanical anomaly of these doors lies in their track system. They are designed to be rolled shut and leveraged securely in place only from the inside. They cannot be opened from the exterior. This highly specific, unidirectional design isolates the inhabitants completely. It implies a defense protocol against an enemy that possessed absolute surface superiority, forcing the defenders to permanently seal themselves below. Against a conventional terrestrial army, an underground bunker contains a fatal vulnerability. A surface army does not need to breach the stone doors. They simply need to locate and block the external air shafts to suffocate the inhabitants. Because the surface vents were left completely exposed, Daniken concluded the defensive layout implies the threat was specifically airborne. He posited an extraterrestrial or cryptoterrestrial enemy that could bombard from above, but lacked the subterranean mapping capabilities to find the ventilation shafts. This wireframe illustrates the advanced fluid dynamics required to ventilate an 85-meter deep network. Over 50 vertical shafts intersect an underground aquifer, drawing clean air down while simultaneously diffusing smoke and heat before it reaches the surface, preventing the city from compromising its own camouflage. This level of decentralized, high-density urban planning aligns with other anomalous, highly advanced ancient sites in the surrounding Anatolian region, such as the megalithic excavation of Göbekli Tepe. The combination of extreme vertical depth, highly advanced airflow engineering, and unidirectional defense mechanisms forces us to seriously evaluate the parameters of the conflict. The architecture perfectly fits a population hiding from a technologically asymmetrical, non-human threat. The physical evidence inside Derinkuyu is so vast and complex that it supports elements of all three conflicting paradigms simultaneously. We are left with wildly different scenarios for our ancestors: religious refugees hiding from regional armies, prehistoric humans surviving a frozen world, or an ancient civilization retreating from an advanced aerial bombardment. Because volcanic tuff cannot be radiocarbon dated, the stone will remain permanently silent on which of these scenarios is the objective truth. Regardless of its origin, the true legacy of this subterranean metropolis is its undeniable proof of radical, large-scale adaptation to existential threats. It required immense psychological and physical endurance for 20,000 humans to abandon the sun and retreat into the absolute darkness of the Earth's crust. Whether humanity was fighting terrestrial empires, global ice ages, or unknown aerial threats, our ultimate instinct for survival possesses an ingenuity that runs deeper than we ever imagined.